Hi, my name is Stacey Bell Lynn. I spent 20 years working in local news, and 13 years ago, I married an NFL player turned coach, Anthony Lynn, and joined the world of NFL super wives. I've always loved hearing about the life behind the headlines. It's where you find the common thread that connects us. That's what I want to do here. My husband played and coached for the Broncos and 49ers. He's currently the running backs coordinator for the Commanders. We've moved 6 times across the country for his various jobs. When I first met my husband, I didn't know anything about football. I just loved the commercials and the snacks. Well, trust me, that's changed. In my new NFL world, the wives became my family and confidants. It is a sisterhood that transcends teams and rivalries. In each episode, I'll talk with a significant other of a player or coach, the football wives who hold it all together. We'll get real and give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of it all. This is the world that I want to share with you. Welcome to Super Wives of the NFL, their inside stories. Let's kick it off. Welcome back. Hayley Elwood is joining me again. Hayley, one of my favorite NFL sideline reporters, to talk about some of the big games, the hot topics from last week, and also what we have going on this week. So, hey, Hayley.
Hey, Stacey, how are you? So good to see you last Sunday.
I know. I was so excited. And we had an interesting game. The Commanders and the Chargers didn't seem like it was going to be in the beginning, but then, wow.
I think that's a classic game of almost... It wasn't even, I mean, I guess you could say it was a tale of two halves, but it really started in the second quarter. And when you look at what the Chargers were doing in the first quarter, it did feel like this was going to be a game that could quickly get away from the Commanders in that sense. But unfortunately, Quentin Johnston had this fumble in the first half of the game that, to me, almost like Freaky Friday to kind of both teams, where all of a sudden the momentum just shifted. And I'm a firm believer in momentum in the NFL and in sports. And I think that when you get something kind of that can go on your side, guys pick up on it and guys feel it. And so the Commanders from that point on pretty much scored 27 unanswered points to beat the Chargers 27-10. And it absolutely ended up, to your point, totally different than I think anyone thought it was going to go from the beginning. But it was great to see you from a personal standpoint. It was great to see Anthony. John Pagano is someone who I've known for a really long time, who used to be the defensive coordinator of the Chargers. There were so many connections between these two teams. It's just kind of funny when you think about these are two teams that don't see each other very often, aren't geographically close at all, but it just shows you how small the NFL world is at the end of the day.
It really is. I'm in the stands with my Commander shirt on, and I really don't like going to away games, but Chargers fans were great. But I'm in the stand, I've got on my Commander shirt, and they show Derwin on the screen, and they announce him, and I'm like, woohoo, Derwin, because that's one of Anthony's favorite players from when he was there. So I get excited seeing Derwin. Then LaDainian is there, and I'm like, oh, there's LaDainian,
Yep.
So there are all these connections, which really made it a lot of fun. I mean, especially for us, since we won. I know it's a tough game for you guys, but all right. Some of the other games, Chiefs, Jaguars was a big one.
It was a crazy Monday night game, and I'm not sure anyone sort of predicted the game to be as close as it was going in, to the end of it, let alone to have the Jags win at the end of the day. And it's no disrespect to them, but they had a good record, but hadn't really beat what you could quantify as maybe good teams at this point of the season. And so to get that win, and it was almost like that last touchdown, the Trevor Lawrence, when he ran in, when he stumbles and he falls and he gets back up and runs it in, it was almost like at that point, they deserve to win at this point. You knew that the Chiefs were still going to get the ball back with about 30 seconds left. And Mahomes, we've seen this story before. We've seen this movie. We know the magic that he can produce. But it just felt like in that moment, and also being in their home stadium, you talk about momentum, you talk about that vibe that just gets thrown out. It just felt like from that point forward, there was nothing that the Chiefs could do 30 seconds later to get a win and to at least, I think they could have tied it at that point, but to get the win. But what a crazy game. And I think, honestly, they wouldn't have tied because it was 31. Nope, they could have. Anyway, math's not great. I told you that. We've been talking about this every week. But what I will say is the Jags are now 4-1, and the Indianapolis Colts are now 4-1. They are both in the same division, the AFC South. Those two teams will not meet. I looked up their schedules until December. They play each other, I think, twice in 3 to 4 weeks or something like that. So as this season rolls on and these teams continue on, it'll be, we're still very early. We're only in week 6, but it'll be really, really interesting what happens with those two teams now sitting with identical records. And if maybe those games in December, those divisional games will mean something. You could talk about the Chiefs. Now they are, again, 2-3, under 500. They have a huge game this week against the Detroit Lions that you and I will probably talk about. And it just sort of feels like every time they take one step forward, they're almost taking 2 steps back and not really getting it together and being the Chiefs that we know and have seen from them to be the team that we know they can be. But at the same time, again, when we talk about this season being very early and we're still in week 6, they could still pick it up, no doubt.
And it's like you said, we've seen that Mahomes magic so many times before. Nobody's going to be shocked, if and when that happens. Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing I noticed, and you mentioned this, there are no more undefeated teams.
There are no more undefeated teams. That was a huge storyline of week 5 where you had the Eagles hosting the Denver Broncos and you had the Buffalo Bills hosting the New England Patriots. That was on Sunday Night Football. And Philadelphia, with that Eagles game, they led the Broncos 17-3 going into the fourth quarter, but they never scored again. And Denver just kicked it into gear to end up beating them 21-17. So you look at kind of that score and go, okay, like what happened there? Is this something that the Eagles sort of have to patch up and figure out as they move forward to have a team like the Broncos come in? Or the Broncos also defensively just really that good too, and offensively sort of kicked it into gear. And then the Bills-Patriots game, that was another crazy, like we said, Sunday Night Football primetime game. Divisional games are always weird. They're always weird. It really doesn't matter if you are, and being in the AFC West for so long, I can attest to this with the Chiefs. You can have a team that's, just far and away running away with the division. But then when they play another divisional team, it's always tighter than you think it is. And so the Bills have sort of been this juggernaut, if you will, in the NFL and certainly in the AFC, and just sort of came down to earth a bit. And, very similar to the Trevor Lawrence play, that happened the following night. Drake May had this incredible play. Drake May is the quarterback of the Patriots, for those who might not be totally hip to it, but he had this incredible play on 1st and 10 with like just over 2 minutes left in the game where he's literally getting taken to the ground, finds Stephon Diggs for another first down, ends up, continuing that drive. And you just sort of felt like this is a force, they're going to do it. And Stephon Diggs, the momentum thing, exactly. And then when you look at the storyline of Stephon Diggs, he spent 4 seasons in Buffalo, didn't end particularly great for those who might have been hip to that storyline, but absolutely turned it on and crushed it. And it's interesting too, because he was coming off a knee injury last season with Houston where he tore his ACL during the season. So to come back, he's a little bit of an older player now. He's been in the league for quite some time, but he just had such an incredible performance. And along with that, I'll throw this in. You have no more undefeated teams. You only have one team that doesn't have a win yet, because the New Orleans Saints beat the Giants this week. So the Saints got their first win, and the New York Jets are the only remaining winless team right now.
No, you never can predict because you don't know how the season is going to go. But I think that, for people watching who maybe don't know a lot about football, or maybe you do, I think there were some high expectations around the Jets this year. Mm-hmm. So is that one a little bit surprising or not?
I think it can be. I think Aaron Glenn coming over, well, he's been in the league for a very, very long time as just a very highly respected coach. He did so many good things with the Detroit Lions as their defensive coordinator over the last couple of years. And so you think of him coming in and sort of setting the tone. You think of the amazing pieces that they have, like Garrett Wilson at receiver, and oh my gosh,
Justin Fields is there, right?
Justin Fields is quarterback. Okay. Yeah. And he came over obviously this year and did some really good things with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. But I think, they are still kind of a youngish team, and maybe there's some things to sort of figure out. And they're in a division where, they absolutely could make some headway in the AFC East, but at the same time, it's kind of been a tough go for that team over the last few years or so. And so maybe it's a little bit more of a rebuild project at this point, but hopefully I believe they play in London this week. So maybe they'll get a win overseas.
Okay. So heading into this week, what are some of the big games we should be looking at this week?
I think definitely we can talk about the Kansas City Chiefs this week as they will face the Detroit Lions. That's going to be on Sunday Night Football. It will be in Kansas City. A couple of years ago, Detroit and KC met in the season opener, and it was just an absolutely crazy game. The Lions are one of those teams that after week one, when they lost to the Green Bay Packers, I think a lot of people looked at them and said, oh, what's going on here? They did lose. As I mentioned, Aaron Glenn was their defensive coordinator. They lost him, and they also lost Ben Johnson, who was their offensive coordinator, who had since become the head coach of the Chicago Bears. And so when you get new pieces coming in to sort of run these very specific sides of the ball, is there sort of a growth period that needs to happen, like a bit of a learning period? Well, since that week one loss, they are now 4-1 and leading the NFC North and look like the Lions that we know the Lions to be. On the flip side, we talked a little bit about Kansas City, and they're just kind of reeling. And when you have that game like they had against the Ravens a couple weeks ago, it's very easy to look at them and go, okay, yeah, the Chiefs are back. Everything's great. But then they kind of fall into this little pit against the Jaguars, and you go, okay, what is really happening here? So it kind of came back to earth. But I predict that's going to be a huge game. Arrowhead is absolutely one of my favorite places in the NFL. I just think it's one of those classic, fantastic football environments. And I've been there for so many primetime games. And so I'm sure all those Chiefs fans are going to be extremely hyped up as they try to get back.
And Lions fans travel well too. So they're going to be represented there, I would imagine.
They absolutely do. And you're still in a good kind of time of year with Kansas City weather and everything like that. And if you're coming from Detroit, I don't think that's a far trip. So it's going to be a pretty easy one.
Okay, so we've got the Monday night game, much, to my dismay, because I do not like East Coast night games. It's a late night, but we've got the Bears in DC, Virginia on Monday night. That's going to be a big one because, we beat them last year on literally the last second Hail Mary, which was great. But with Caleb and Jaden back, this is going to be a good one to watch too.
Absolutely think so. Both of them in the same draft class, both of them taken very close to each other. I think it's one of those games too that crazy to already have like history, if you want to mention it when you talk about how that game ended last year and what it essentially did for the Bears and what it kind of did for the Commanders in terms of sort of these two roads that they almost split, like paths that they split in terms of one team that began to falter and the other team. As you mentioned, the Commanders went on to the NFC Championship game. So there was a lot happening there. That's a great game. And that is, I think, at this point in the season, when you talk about storylines and you talk about sort of like the NFL of the future, these two quarterbacks are going to be names that you're going to talk about for a really, really long time. And it's all about also getting the exposure of the national stage where you mentioned you might not like the Monday games and the night games. And I totally get it. Even on the West Coast team, you're not getting home until like 3 a.m. on a primetime game. But at the same time, the exposure and the sort of celebrating of the two guys leading these teams, as well as their teams and coaches and everything in general, is really, really awesome to be put on a national stage.
Okay. Any other big ones that I'm not thinking about coming up for the weekend?
Yeah, I was looking at the 49ers and Buccaneers, and it's mainly because these two teams are 4-1. And I was at the Niners-Rams game, the Thursday night game, which was in week 5. So it feels so long ago now. That game went to overtime. Mac Jones was incredible in that game. I mean, he has just been absolutely everything I think the Niners have wanted and more to fill in for Brock Purdy when he's been out. He threw for 342 yards. There was overtime involved. Had 2 touchdowns in that game. He had this connection with Kendrick Bourne, and I talked with Kendrick Bourne after the game in the locker room, and I forgot the two of them were in New England together, so they have a bit of a rapport that they'd built. But that team, those 49ers, are going into Tampa to face the 4-1 Buccaneers. And Baker Mayfield, I know you and I have talked about him over the last couple of weeks. And he, at this point, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many, is kind of leading the MVP conversation where I was looking up his stats. He's currently 4th in passing yards, tied for 3rd with 10 passing touchdowns, 9th in passer rating. And I believe he just has 1 turnover in 5 games so far. So he is playing extremely clean football. And they've got this amazing rookie receiver, Emeka Egbuka, who came from Ohio State, who Mike Evans, we've talked about him, has been hurt. Igbuka has been filling in this role, and he and Baker have just built this incredible connection right out the bat. So I just think that's a really, really good game. And we talk about the 49ers and Bucks. They're both in the NFC. They're both vying, different divisions, but same conference. And so is this a game that whoever wins could, help determine seeding at the end of the season? We shall find out.
That is going to be a good one. I forgot about that. One other thing I wanted to touch on. We see these, and I think there were 2 games lost like this in recent weeks where the guys are coming in for touchdowns, they're celebrating, and then they drop the ball. And there was a big deal in Arizona because the head coach, it looked like he said something to the player. It's just crazy that you're right there and you drop the ball and the game turns and you lose. Like, that's crazy, right?
It's crazy. It happened in the Colts-Rams game that I was at a couple of weeks ago prior to, where the Colts player takes it in, drops it right before he crosses the goal line. And so for those, again, who might not totally know, when that happens, possession goes to the other team. It almost acts as like a turnover where the score does not count because they don't get into the end zone. And in fact, that team who had the ball loses possession as it goes to the other team. So you essentially get penalized for it. It is just crazy that this is happening at such a rapid rate. It's like, don't do anything. Just wait, just go.
Yeah.
Fine. And I will say this, in that press box for that Rams Colts game, everyone just erupted because it's rare to see something like that live. And when it happens, you just go, oh my God, like everyone just kind of freaked out. But weird that it has now happened in back-to-back weeks. And I think I'm clearly not a coach in the NFL, but I would be hard pressed to not think that these guys are driving that force home of just hold on to it, cross it, celebrate.
Yeah, then we celebrate once the points are on the board.
Yeah, when that score changes, when that number flips, adds 6 to your total, then you're good.
Okay, Hayley, it is always good to see you. So much fun. We're going to do this every week. So I'll let everybody know where it's going to be posted, and I look forward to talking to you next week about what week we're in. Is this week 5?
We're in 6, so we are getting really close here to the halfway point, which is crazy.
Okay. All right. Hayley Elwood, NFL sideline reporter. Thank you so much, Hayley. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Stacey.
Okay, thanks for listening, and thanks in advance for liking this podcast and leaving a review. Meet you here next week.